welcome back. This is the Out of Stone Games podcast,
That's
where
right.
we are currently creating a Celtic mythology and historically inspired sourcebook for our legendary lands of Avallen, for our game that's already out, Legends of Avallen. And as well, it will be compatible with the newest release of 5th edition, which I have yet to dive into. Zilphia and anyone else in the chat, I'm curious, have you guys been diving into the new 5e? And if so, what do you think? I've only looked at
Very
parts of
good
it,
question.
mostly the preview stuff, but I haven't actually delved into it completely yet. I haven't had time. I've been working on our own game. It's hard.
Yeah, it's tough. I get it. It's but no, we want to make a chat about that. We want to have a conversation on stream about that at some point in the
Yeah,
near
I
future,
think
don't we?
maybe we should make that a goal for the next week, but no promises. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow,
jeez, Sylvia hates it.
Well, maybe you can give us a taste of why you hate it. I'm interested in hearing that.
Yeah,
Anyone in
yeah.
the chat Dungeons and Dragons, you hate it. Let us know what you hate,
And what you
and
love.
we can tell you how our game is similar or not similar if you're not familiar with Legends of Avallen.
But Zilphia, we need some additional context here. Did you also hate the previous version? And this just hasn't changed your mind? Or do you hate it compared to the previous version? In which case, then, what's changed? Also, I appreciate that maybe you don't want to write like a 3-page essay in Twitch chat, so
Sure.
I guess some bullet points is fine too.
Yeah, I know you're probably at work or whatever. You're starting to world, so it's like can't just invite you on stream and talk about it on your clock.
Yeah.
But no, it's good to hear some initial reviews. If anyone wants to share their initial reviews, that's fine. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I didn't play much. The D&Ds I am most familiar with are second and three. So I haven't played much fourth or fifth actually. 5th edition, but and you mostly. Like, did you play much 5th edition?
No,
there?
actually. We
just
played
read it, right?
We played 3.5 and then quickly switched to Pathfinder, which is basically 3.5 plus, like 3.75, I guess.
Right.
And then I did play some 5th edition a few years ago, a bunch, I guess, with friends online and stuff. But since then, it's been Legends of Avallen.
I did do. Wait, did I play that with you?
Yeah, I think so. Or it was Pathfinder. Also, actually, chat another thing as well. While Zilphia's writing her essay, last stream I noticed some issues in the recording that Kurt was way louder than me. So please let us know if the audio is unbalanced or not, because I can fix that if that's the case.
If I'm written louder, let me know.
Yeah.
I also want to become a mod, but I don't know how to become a mod.
What, a mod on the
my
stream?
phone? Yeah, I am a mod, but like I don't.
Oh, no, I have to do mod stuff. You mean?
Yeah. Well, don't worry. You're the mod now.
Yeah. I'll try and do stuff.
Yeah, next week, soon. We want to talk about it, and if you have an opinion, Pigeon Bella said, "Ooh, what's up, Pigeon Paladin? We are lovers of pigeon as well."
Oh, double essays. Oh yeah, you are lovers of pigeon. Yeah, shout out to Chrissy's Instagram, and in fact, do you want to plug that right now, quick?
Well, I don't have a computer, so.
Can I find it? I'll find the link.
Yeah. So yeah, we haven't looked at the numbers because we've been on vacation and we just got back. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to look at these comments real quick. Pigeon Paladin says that they looked a bit and not a big D&D guy, but it's fine. All your problems with 5 weren't changed aside from adding Asimar into the core species of the game. And Zilphia says you hate it compared to the previous one. They overcomplicated character creation. They turned into a multi-hour process for basic creation. That's just one thing to keep it short. Deep down, you're a 3.5 gal. Okay, I got you. So, okay, interesting. So I'll keep when we go through it too. I'll come up with opinions on that when we talk about it and we can compare notes.
Yeah, I'm going to read that as well, what you just said, so I was concentrating. Just for anyone in the chat that loves pigeons, one of the artists on this project, a wonderful lady by the name Chrissy, she designed the logo for the project, so we're doing other things as well in the future. She has a web store where she makes her own artwork, which is incredible, and she's currently got a project, what would you call it, like enamel pin design for 2 pigeons that she saw making love on her balcony.
Cloacal,
which is a beautiful thing.
The official term being a cloacal kiss. And she designed the art, and her fan base seemed liked it, so she's trying to get together enough orders for people who want a pin of 2 lovely pigeons. And these pigeons visit us all the time. They're named Titus and Delilah.
Yeah, well, she does feed them, to be fair. She does encourage
He did feed them. She feeds them occasionally. They still pass by even if we don't feed them.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
And they're cool. Yeah, they're cute. So they're we want them to thrive in their own pigeonly way.
Yeah. Sorry, Kurt, I know you
Hell
just
yeah.
read these bits, but I was searching the link and I want to read them again. Sorry for
Please,
people
go
on the YouTube video now watching this, and I'm about to reread what Kurt just read,
ahead.
but here we are.
Go
Pigeon
ahead.
Panda said, I looked a bit, not a big D&D guy, yeah, that's fine. But it's fine, all my problems with 5 weren't changed, aside from adding ASMR. Okay, so for you it's the same old, same old. And then for Zilphia, I hate it compared to the previous one. Wow, so for you it's not the same old, same old. They overcomplicated character creation, interesting. They turned it into a multi-hour process for basic creation. There's just one to keep it short. Yeah, deep down with 3.5 ego. Yeah, 3.5 ego for me as well. So I guess one last question to follow up for that. Is it because there's too many options now? Like there's lots of different choices you have to make during character creation that bothers you? Because fun enough, with this sourcebook, we're making, I mean, I'm very proud of Avallen character creation because it's so streamlined and just get stuck in straight away. But we're going to be adding some stuff to it now. But hopefully it's not a big add because we're just adding choosing your clan that you belong to, right? And I feel like that should be a part of the world. So that's what we're doing there. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's like and pigeon. Sorry, I said pigeon because I saw Pigeon Paladin saying their favorite animal right there. So pigeon creation is very complex. No, pigeon character creation.
It looks quite simple actually, according to the pin. Just a lot of fluttering and colourful kissing.
Yeah. No, Faerie character creation, like on Kickstarter. So we're creating games, and even though we have Avallen, it's still supposed to be. It's too big of a market to ignore, right? Like even if you're making non-5e investor focus, you still cater to the 5e audience a little bit to build an audience. That's what a lot of people do, and character options still seem to be very popular, right?
Yeah.
Like at least with the previous iterations of 5e. And I wonder whether or not WotC saw that. I was like, oh, well, can't let these guys take all the glory. We gotta put even more character options.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there definitely is like a history of that. They won't admit it, but Wizards of the Coast definitely follow very successful 5e Kickstarters and indie projects and then see what's popular and kind of take it on board, I think. Like, they do literally follow the money.
Yeah. And the thing there, too, is like, I don't know, I think there's a balance point. I think you can go too far in one direction. Right? On one hand, you don't want your characterization to be like, okay, you're a fighter, go. Like you want something there to play with. At the other hand, I'm not a huge fan of like, here's my 10-page character backstory.
Yeah, plus here's my spreadsheet. Yeah.
But yeah, all the other things. Like, well, because the reason, even aside from it being like unfair to other players who don't have the time to do that, right? Because I get that you're interested in it, but just more like part of the fun of role-playing games and storytelling are emerging qualities of it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Letting that come through with playing with people and letting that be the story, rather than trying to force everything from your backstory into this collaborative storytelling experience. So I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah.
But
well, that's what Legends of Avallen's about, right? You start the game as a humble tribes member, and then you don't even start with a class. You're just a blacksmith or whatever, and then you go out into the world, and then you learn how to fight and use magic. So you play the game.
Mm-hmm.
My intent was to make it approachable for new players, and for old players, it's still kind of exciting. I think starting from the beginning, because you don't have to know what your character will be to even start playing the game. Only after the first session do you then choose, do I want to be a fighter or do I want to be a mage, that kind of thing. I want people to play the game first before they make these choices, because how can you decide? How do you know if you're a paladin or a druid if you haven't even played the game yet? Alright, what's Sylvia say here? To some extent, they overinflated certain aspects that didn't need to be touched. They are forcing in certain things that many people could easily ignore in 5e without any impact to your character build. I see, okay. I think I see what you're saying. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm intrigued to check it out then and see how that plays out.
So, hopefully we'll read through it and we'll give you your. I mean, I think the tricky thing is, since I didn't have as much experience with 5e, even if I read this new one, I wonder whether or not I'd be like, I'll love it. I mean, I did read the rulebook a long time ago, so I don't know. Maybe there's things I don't remember, and it would still be kind of new to me.
Got a Discord.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess another part of it we could critique is that obviously when D&D makes new editions, they're not trying to sell you one book, they're trying to sell you 3 books, right? They divide it all up into 3 books. They have the player's guide, the GM's guide, and then the monster manual. And so to justify a new player's guide, it has to be full of new stuff, right? It's a whole book.
Yeah.
They kind of paint themselves into a corner there where they have to make loads of new things.
Well, and it's by design. That's the classic structure of it, because I think once upon a time, that's what first edition did. But really, do they need they could probably, the Dungeon Master's Guide is kind of critically panned, right? Isn't it? Like in 5th edition?
Yes, and they're supposed to be making it better now, yeah.
Yeah, it's the weakest. It was traditionally the weakest of the 3 books. I mean, the weakest 3 books here. I love the 2nd edition Dungeon Master Guide and 1st edition Dungeon Master Guide. So yeah, I wonder whether or not they could just get away with freaking 1 book, right? But then they wouldn't do that because
then they sell less. I mean, so with Avallen, I had to make it 1 book, right? I put in the player's guide, world lore, a whole GM guide, like how to GM plus the bestiary in 1 250-page manual that's sitting behind you. I can see it there just in the corner of the camera view, which is awesome. And it's right here. Yeah, here, this is the book we're talking about. So that really necessitated streamlined design, and I still managed to fit in 10 professions, 20 subclasses, and 10 legendary paths, right? Plus all the beasts and things like that. But it did mean I couldn't go into as much depth as we wanted to in certain places, but then we get to make more books. So I guess we're kind of there eventually as well, but I do feel like our trifecta is going to be different to their trifecta. Their trifecta is player guide, GM guide, and monster manual, right? And it's like, there's so much stuff for each one thing, but for us it's going to be a rule book, campaign book, and then a setting guide. And I don't know, they feel like things that should each warrant 1 whole book and won't feel like they're bloated. Like, I can't imagine doing a whole book on just player options for Avallen. That just seems too much,
Yeah, and this is like an interesting question, right? That's kind of been asked since the beginning of the hobby, which is, why do you need a book for something that's imaginary in the first place, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like a thing that Gary Gygax sort of muses on in the introduction of the first Dungeon Master's Guide.
Oh, really?
Which I have on my shelf here too. Here's the first Dungeon Master's Guide. This bad boy right here.
Oh, hell yeah!
It's
I didn't know you had that. Was that there when I came to visit you?
Yeah, probably.
Bro, I wanted to read that. What the hell? Okay, I'll have to check it out next time.
I mean, I don't want to pull. It would take me a second to see if I could find it. But it's like, when they explain what Dungeons and Dragons is and why do you need it.
Yeah.
It's like, the reasoning and justifications for the game, right? Of course, the ultimate reason and justification is a playable and interesting game, and how much rationalization can actually go into a fantasy game. So this is the idea of what are you making, and that's in service to the players, because people could just sit at a table and make shit up.
Yeah.
But if you're buying into a game, you're buying into an experience, and in a way, another person is saying that you should play it. And one of the issues with what you're describing is Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual is even if you have all that, you still don't necessarily know. You don't have a thing to let you play the game.
You need a campaign for that. Yeah, exactly, or someone to
or an adventure, intro adventure, and those things do exist, and that's great, and that's the bread and butter of a lot of what also people are interested in getting.
But then that's another book, right?
Yeah, and that's or a pamphlet or a zine or whatever. But what you're proposing as a structure, the way we set it up too, I like it. I mean, I think it's okay. You have the way to play a book. You make your own thing. Here's a thing, big campaign to play with your friends if you don't want to make your own thing. And then here's some lore if you want to make your own adventures and make your characters more fleshed out and understand the fantasy world more. That's fun. And then even when I used to play D&D, my favorite part was always the lore shit. I love the Forgotten Realms box sets and all that stuff. So Pigeon Paladin has a comment. They say when creating character takes an hour plus unless you're using their website / app like D&D Beyond and paying them you already have physically. I say a lot of people don't like it. I definitely don't. Yeah, that's definitely fair. Because that's the thing too, right? You're spending an hour. It also speaks here. Sorry, one point about that.
Sure.
When it takes forever to build a character, that speaks to the lack of risk in the world too. I think in a way, right? Because
go on. What do you mean?
If you
elaborate,
if
pray tell.
Well, if the game, if the game mechanic says it takes you an hour to 2 hours to build your character, and they recognize that as an investment, they don't want your character to die. If they don't want your character to die, then that means that there's less lethality. If there's less lethality, that means that there's less risk involved, and it feels less game-like and more railroady. Possibly. Again, this is the theory. Whereas like if you have a game where it's like easy to roll up a character, if they die, you're like, oh, that sucked. Well, I'll make another character.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right, and we're kind of halfway between those extremes, because I know a game like Morkborg, which is just death incarnate when it comes to player characters. I'm pretty sure you make a character in there by like rolling dice to choose random traits, and you get like 3 traits and a piece of equipment, and then you're good to go. You can make a character in literally 1 minute, I think, if you just roll the dice fast enough. And then your character will die, and then you'll make another one, again, just as fast. That's part of the fun of the experience. And as you said there, 5e or D&D, the other side of it, it takes ages to get invested, and then I feel like maybe Avallen's kind of like the halfway point there, where you can make a character quickly, you just choose your stats and your starting profession, and then you're good to go, and you start off as a humble person, so it kind of feels okay. You know, if those kind of characters die because they're just humble tribesfolk and life is hard and difficult, but that hasn't really happened to me yet. I still kind of against player characters dying, I must admit. It is just a pain in the ass in general, and a bit sad, but at the same time, the game feels lethal because of our wound system and no HP and things like that. That's a whole other discussion about, game rules and how they impact the feeling of play and stuff.
Dilcia made comments on the brutality of systems by saying that 5e compared to 3.5 is like that. 3.5 was brutal in a good way, and 5e implemented death saving throws for players, only which give that exact vibe. Like this is a whole game.
It's really difficult to die in D&D. It's really difficult to die.
And that's because that's because one is the main role playing game that that's experience people have, and having your character die when you're attached to it doesn't feel good. So it really depends on what you're getting into. And when people play D&D, they want to be heroic, and part of being heroic means you don't die so easily. Your death has meaning, right?
Yes.
And that's hard to do if you're always dying and super lethal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always that way, right? D&D 1, like first edition, characters died all the time. One of the most famous adventures was like Labyrinth of Madness, which was meant to fucking kill you when you're level 17, and you just had to roll up a new character. But people complain about it, right? Because it doesn't feel good. But it creates a different set of problems. I think there's a similar parallel in Magic the Gathering, right?
Made this tangent real quick.
No, it has to do with it has to do with game design and mana screw.
Okay.
Fucking new players hate mana screw, right? They want their lands. And the issue there is, but if you build a game without mana screw, it creates another set of problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where the game is built in, it loses a certain amount of excitement to it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could always make a land drop, and then there's a certain kind of card you just don't play anymore, because you'll just play your expensive cards as mana or whatever, if that's how you're depending on the system's built out. So what I'm trying to say is, by making a game less lethal, yes, your characters live longer, but that creates a different set of gaming issues, I think.
I mean, I can speak directly from experience. For against the Faerie Queen, I really wanted there to be journeys that mattered. Like, you'd move from place to place, and the journey itself was an adventure that had risk and a feeling, and with risk becomes exaltation exaltation when you succeed, right? You can't be excited about succeeding if there is no risk of failure. So I wanted journeys to be part of the campaign, and I knew I wanted to make it 5e compatible as well. And then I looked at 5th edition's journey mechanics, and I just despaired. I was like, it's impossible to fail journeys in 5e, at least as the way they're done, because there's so many classes, like the Ranger. They're completely invalidated. They can't get lost. They can't run out of food. They can't run out of water for a party. Like, that's just in the rules. Like, they're fine forever in the wild. So then where's the tension? Well, I guess you'd say the tension is in the obstacles you find along the way. And that's all well and good, but that's then not a journey to me. That's just moving from one obstacle to another obstacle. It's just a dungeon in another form, right? So I ended up having to change, like, just put a load of GM advice, like, hey, if you want to run these journeys as intended, where the journey itself is a risk that requires strategic decisions about, do we go here or do we go there? Do we push on or do we wait? Those kinds of things. Do we take the river because you can't get lost when you're following the river, but it takes longer? Or do we go straight through the middle of the forest where it's quicker, but it's a chance of getting lost? Those kind of decisions. If you want to make that kind of part of the play, then you have to take all this stuff out of the game. We wrote a list of, like, okay, Rangers can't do this, change it to this instead. Like, it's still powerful, but it's something different. Druids can't summon good berries. Druids can't create water out of thin air. Like, we did just modify so much stuff to to make the game even some kind of risk of starvation, like even possible.
Because they have those mechanics because it makes the unfun part go faster, right?
Yes, yeah. But my argument is make that part fun instead.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and if you look at the origin hobby again, Lord of the Rings is a good example.
I know
they really are concerned with Tolkien was a naturalist. He was a fucking survival. Like he loved nature. He loved traveling. He talks about paths. Half the book is him talking about fucking what road to take and like, oh, there's a mountain. If we go that way, this will be on our east. Whatever. Like he's very into that.
Yeah, and I must admit that a lot of my system was originally inspired and based on the Lord of the Rings role-playing game system because they knew that journeys were important to the Lord of the Rings. So they had to include a system there. And so that was the first place I went to read for better systems for journeys, and that's where I got the journey roll idea from. But then a lot of changed from there. But yeah.
Yeah, but fundamentally the spirit is the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. I just love that when you're playing Avallen, you have to consider how much food do we have, and make decisions based on that, and deciding, actually the river will be slower, but we won't get lost if we follow the river. That's a benefit to going slower, or if we go straight. Those kind of decisions are fun. Anyway, we've got a bunch of chat to catch up on. Silky says, my D&D table has a disclaimer that your character can and most likely will die if you're dumb. Very good, I approve. Death is always on the table, as my DM says. Yeah, nice. And Pigeon Paladin says, I do like that in Avallen, thank you, Pigeon. You almost create the structure of your character in character creation, and then spend the rest of your game creating your character. Yeah, that was my ambition. Which in D&D, I feel like you end up creating everything at first, and then get some more abilities, but the character mechanically tends to stagnate, The only growth is what the GM gives you in the story. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then everyone needs to be. I mean, yes, everyone wants to kind of feel special, but when everybody is like trying to be a version of Drizzt Do'Urden or like their archetype to the max, and there's a billion things on your character sheet to keep track of, and those things are important, right? Because if you didn't have that, then there wouldn't be as much of a game. These things are to facilitate the collaborative storytelling. Like everything should be in service of the story you're telling together.
Yeah.
But if what you're telling me, from what I'm hearing, if it's like the character is just fucking has all this shit on top of it, where you might not leave room for that collaboration. So and maybe that's the issue. But I don't know. We have to read the book first and see how we feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well,
okay. Well, you just come back from. Sorry, what?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying you just come back from an epic trip, and I wondered if you want to talk about it on stream a little bit. If anything inspired you at all.
So, speaking of journeys.
Yeah, there we go. Nice.
And actually, that's a good point because there is a little bit of that there. We went to this town, the city or town is probably more apt, called Gujo, and it's this little city in Gifu. And we heard it described
my home for 2 years when I lived in Japan.
Yeah, shout out to Gifu. Yeah. And it was described to us as like Kyoto in the mountains, like a better Kyoto.
Yeah.
And we went and it was fucking amazing. Like it was. I mean, I've been living in Japan for like 9 years, and it's on my Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. Look, I put on my story, and it's like this river town with fucking houses on these cliffs, and people are just fishing, and it's so peaceful and beautiful.
It's funny, I've been to Gujo, but I didn't really go walking like you did, and now I'm really jealous and I want to go back.
Dude, it was amazing. There was so much. We liked it so much, we're considering buying a house there.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's close enough. It's like an hour to 2 hour drive. And, there's these streets, river streets, where you walk by and there's a giant koi fish that you could feed as you're walking to the river. And there's like not that many there's tourists, but not that many tourists. And we ate at one of the best udon restaurants we ever had. Everyone was so friendly. We went to this mountain, waterfall, and we parked at the bottom of this hill. We just saw it on the Google Maps. We went up there. Nobody, no other tourists, just us.
Yeah. For
like an hour and a half, 2 hours.
I mean, I want to show that picture on stream, but I just went onto your Instagram and the story's not there anymore. I couldn't find it. But like, there's a picture of you. Actually, no, you sent me pictures on Facebook. Maybe I can get them that way.
That too, yeah. You can go and share that.
Yeah.
I do have my story. I could do the old school thing and just do that thing. Yeah, I'm just sitting by this.
Yeah.
It looks like a fucking fun. I mean, this must be the inspiration for a lot of JRPGs. Like people going to these villages because it looks like a JRPG Chrono Trigger village. I'm like, this is insane. It's beautiful and peaceful, and it's.
Can you show the picture of you at the waterfall where everything's just like moss green? Like,
oh yeah,
everything's just covered in moss. I love moss. Big moss fan.
yeah, Moss is legit here. I got my Goodbye the River. Oh yeah, this one. Let me
Yeah, there might be you in it, but that's fine because we know what you look like.
Yeah, this bad boy.
It's just
it was
green everywhere and water. I love trickling streams surrounded by
and
greenery.
And this city Gujo, it really prides itself on like water. Like there's a whole thing where everyone works together as a community to make sure the water is as pure as possible. And I swear to God, it's like from the bridge, you can see fish swimming like hundreds of feet away, maybe 200-300 feet away, in the water below, which is crazy. It's not dirty. It's just it's like pure clean water flowing over rocks and moss and I.
All right, guys, we need to make this Kickstarter a banger so that Kurt can buy a house in Gujo.
And then I'm gonna start streaming from the house, and I can just do special YouTube videos while we. So anyway, Okay, so the big thing is. It's been a long time since I've been in like nature remotely and hiking and all that stuff. I mean, and it's a long time since I've taken a trip just for ourselves because usually when we travel is for business or whatever. And it was like this sadness that we as like a society, when I go to the city, I see like garbage. And, like Nagoya's pretty clean. Japan's a pretty clean area, like in the cities. But the rivers are still dirty and people leave trash and people take it for granted. And it's amazing. It's a community effort. Like I was picking trash. I saw a piece of foil in the river and I took it out because like, no, fuck that. I don't want like anything to pollute this river. You know what I mean? I'm like cleaning it up because it's a thing that belongs to all of us. And if you haven't been in nature in a while, I'm sure Zilphia does because she, based on where she lives, what I know about where she lives. But do yourself a favor. I hadn't gone out in nature in a long time, and it really inspires me to write and incorporate. I mean, it's Japan, but as opposed to Wales or whatever in the British, but something similar, right? Like getting connected with. I don't want to use the word energy because that's overused. It's kind of like cheesy, but there's.
I was gonna say the spirit of the land, like
Yeah, there's this energy, like because it's alive. There's fucking trees get it. Trees just exist and enjoy existing.
Yeah.
And we need to learn from that
and turn them into books.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It's amazing, and it's. Just makes me want to be a druid more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my takeaway. I loved it. I still love it, and I want to go back. And I recommend that if anyone goes to Gujo, just do us a favor and just take care of it and appreciate it and love it, just like any place that's in your community, I guess. So yeah, that's my take. It was wonderful, and we're looking to go back soon.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
so yeah, that's my spiel.
Here's my segue. You felt the spirit of those lands, the spirits in those rocks, the spirits beneath the earth, and today we're going to talk about the spirits beneath Wales, right?
That's right, the spirits of Wales. Yeah, like being in nature, you also get that feeling, right? Because you're alone, but sometimes you'll hear something in the forest, and you're like, wait, what was it? What was that? Like,
I had that experience. I think I told you about this. It was last year, I think, or last Christmas or something like that. I was back home in Essex, and there's a bunch of forests there still. There's one right behind our house even, but we drove to another one, and we just went to walk in this forest with my mum, and we're just talking and just hanging out. It was cold, we were in a coat, and I had forgotten how loud forests are. There's like hardly anyone there. I mean, there were people walking around, but that's not where the noises were coming from. The noises were coming from like acorns dropping from trees and just making thuds on the ground, just leaves falling down, and you forget how loud leaves can be in the wind, and then like twigs snapping. It's like, well, I didn't snap that twig. Who bloody snapped that twig? Something snapped that twig. It's just, it's so noisy. You think it's like peaceful, quiet, but no, there's so much happening. There's so much life.
Yeah, there's so many things to focus on in what we might consider as, like you said.
And now we sound like right city folk, right? We're like, remember that time I walked to the forest like 1 year ago? Yeah, my granddad would laugh at me right now. He lives on a bloody farm in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it's people do live in cities, and we live in cities for a reason, right? Because I like living in the city. I play music. I like gigs. Certain things you can only do in the city, and certain things you do in the forest. But there's a reason. When you're in the nature and you hear stuff, you can, like, even your rational mind is like, yeah, there's nothing there. You understand why people believe in fairies and supernatural. because it's easy to.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I read a theory
that's
today that people saw old pagans doing rituals in forests and things, and then called them fairies. Like, imagine if you're at this time period where there's like Christian and pagan rituals happening at the same time, and these Christian folk walk in the forest and see a bunch of pagan people painted up doing dances and stuff. Like, yeah, there might be creatures from another world. Yeah.
I mean, I would. In the forest I was in yesterday, I would lose my shit if I saw some like people like with fucking colorful clothing just jumping around.
Wait, Pigeon. You just sent a message and my auto mod flagged it because you swore in it for aggression. Let me see if I can approve your message. Living in a city makes me mad. I am mad. Yeah. I will allow this message. I approve this message.
Living in a city makes me...
Yeah. Oh, you can read it if you want. Yeah.
Living in a city makes me sad, but around me, that's where I can afford to live. It just means that I have my choice places where I can fuck off into the woods. Yeah, it's. I guess I am kind of like the reason we're considering buying a house is that it can be cheap, and we're close enough. Like we can be close enough, and it's easy to go there. And you have that too, right? In Wales, like you're in the city, but you're not that far from nature.
Oh no, yeah, we can go for walks. We don't, and we should more often. But yeah, it's real close if you want it. Yeah. Actually, that's not true.
Okay.
There's a nature reserve just near our house that we like to walk through actually sometimes, where it's just full of birds and fish and reeds and frogs and stuff. Yeah.
And that's what the technology companies don't want you to do. I want to play a role-playing game in the woods with you, bro. That's the stream. We should do that.
I once played a role-playing game in a big grassy park outside a castle in Japan. That was good. It makes a difference actually. The setting, it was really good.
Yeah, storytelling.
Anyway, I tried to segue and we failed. We're talking about the spirits of Wales today.
The spirits of Wales.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to get some of that topic too. So yeah, that's. So we'll be talking about.
Sylvia, sorry to cut you off, but yeah, LARPing in the woods definitely counts. Holy crap, that counts. That's even better, I think, really, when it comes to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could do LARPing here, but I don't know if I could. It'd be hard. I could find enough people who are bilingual, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. So LARPing in the woods counts, and if this game keeps getting more popular, you could head up the Legends of the Avallen LARP community to do the Sealy course in the forest. And we'll be talking about the Faerie courts of Avallen. So this is something. Did we mention it in the core rulebook about Faerie courts? I know we talk about it in the context.
You know what? I don't know if we did. Let me switch view here, screen share.
I don't know if I don't know if that's actually a thing we talk about.
Let me go have a look. I don't actually know, and I'm just going to find out by typing court and see if we mentioned it. Oh, we mentioned court 33 times apparently, and courts twice, so let's find out. Oh, the court cards. God damn it, because we're playing card-based RPG, aren't we?
Well, also, the court was, when we decided 5-8, if I recall correctly, that was also part of the imagery of it, like the courts,
Yes,
courts.
Yeah, it was, but the Court of Giants for Faerie, aka Stonehenge. Hold court. Okay, well, we have something here. Oh yeah, we have so we had this transitionary period, right, where the Everones first came to Avallen. There are gods and deities, and they were once mortal, killed the great Faeseeker, the demons that ruled the land before them, gained the divine powers and returned as gods themselves. And then we said they held court both in the worlds of mortals and in the other world. So there's an idea there that the gods have courts, which would make sense because they were once mortal and mortals had their own courts, so they might carry their own tradition. And then we say the divine Broindel, aka the Everones, possess the power to transform the souls of their worthy dead into Telwyth Teg, the noble fairy houses of Annwn. So we call them fairy houses there. And I guess now we're changing that to fairy courts instead.
Let's talk about that because I have an idea on that.
Okay.
And real quick, Zofia says that some people in Japan opened up a LARP here, and not sure if it's still running. If you get in contact with them again, let me know because that's interesting to me. So yes, because the idea of fairy houses is the fairy court. I mean, courts are different from houses. Courts are like where people gather to sort of do political things, and houses are the groups and the fairy houses they belong to. And that's an argument we can have on stream. So we can we can talk about that.
Here we go. In Against the Faerie Queen, we do mention it. Spoilers for Against the Faerie Queen. This is the Game Master's guide, so don't look unless you're a Game Master. It says here, it's intended solely for Game Master's eyes. The Faerie Queen, we say, as described in the opening tale of this chapter by the Faerie Queen herself, she is an esteemed Telwyth Teg in the Dryadic Fae Court of the Evermother. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, so
this is this idea here that the Evermother has a Fae Court at least, and the Faerie Queen was indeed a prominent member of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you draw parallels to real life courts, right? You would have a court for the monarch, but you would also have courts for significant political figures in your right. Like would they also hold court, or did the king only? In medievalism, I guess it was mainly the king.
Wait, what are you saying? Are you saying members?
I'm trying to draw a parallel to historical
court.
courts. How did historical courts in medieval times? Obviously, the king held court.
Yeah.
But did dukes and so on also hold minor courts?
I mean, I don't know, but
yeah.
I mean, it depends what you mean by a court. But yeah, you would imagine that they would have their local advisors that they would meet with, right?
And the local
populace could then petition them and things like that. So
yeah, to ask for things and give reports and so on. Yeah. So I imagine there's a whole system of large upper courts and lower courts and so on. That's where it comes from, right? And for judgment and
well,
so
not just that. I mean, the Celts themselves had courts as well. I mean, I guess they wouldn't call them courts. They'd have a different word for it. But there would be where's the society section? We have a great section on Celtic society because we did our research and imported this into our world. We're socializing. Varlic society.
Yeah,
Varlic hierarchy. So for those that are new, Varlic is our Celtic people, the people of Avallen. And yes, so Varlic hierarchy, those of the same tier can expect to be able to call council with each other. Those of a lower tier should expect to be called upon by those of a higher tier, and we have to earn the right to speak to them. Yeah, so we have at the top, we have the Everones, then we have the Bryndal, which is the royalty, like the Brenin, which is the king or queen of a clan, and then they have the Brenkin, which is their family, and then Brengard. These are their advisors and warriors that directly service them. So their court, I'd imagine, would be Brenin, the Brenkin, and the Brengard, right? And then any legends that happen to be nearby that want to take part. And then you have the nobility. These are leaders of tribes. So the Brenkin, the Brengard. So that would be then their court. So you'd have courts for local leaders and then courts for the kings and queens.
And there could be some slight parallels, I imagine, with how the fairies work, where you have like the high Fae court, the main Fae court of like the Everone, and so on, with the heads of fairy houses. But each fairy house also has their own little space in the world where they compete with each other.
Wait. So what are you calling a house there? Fairy house? What did you mean by that? You just said it, but what did you mean?
Oh well, what I mean, for example, is. So this is something that we haven't decided on and fleshed out fully, but we don't know yet exactly how the Telwyth Teg organize themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So for example,
that's what we're discussing today. I guess we haven't made it obvious yet. Today we are dealing with the fairy courts of Avallen, how they work, who's in them, how they're structured, what do they do, that kind of thing.
And a fundamental structure we understand about how our fairy courts work, or the fairy world works, is you basically have the Everones, who are the heads of their respective worlds. They're basically the king and queen. They're still the king and queen of the emperor of their bubble of the other world, right?
The god, the Everone, yeah.
They're the god, yes. But they exist in that space rather than just being above it, right? They sometimes they hold court, so they're there. And then they have the Telwyth Teg, who are their noble fairies. And there's a lot of them because it's the afterlife, and it's a question of does each fairy. So each fairy is organized around the Everone and their court, but the fairy Telwyth Teg themselves could designate families for themselves within their
and that's
court.
What you're saying is a house. That's your suggestion.
Yeah, that's what a house is. Yeah.
So a house is like a grouping of fae within
the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like a faction within that everyone's court, so to speak.
Yeah. So I guess that calls into question like how organized are the Fae and how this works. So basically, you're suggesting that there are these noble Toad with Tag, the advisors of their god, the warriors, the actors, the diplomats of their god, and then those individual Fae then have their own subordinate Fae that are close to them, and then that's their house, right? So so if there's one Fae, for example, Epona, there'd be the house of Epona as well.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, and arguably the Faerie Queen, she was, she had the name of the Faerie Queen because she was the right hand lady warrior of the Evermother. Mm-hmm. But hypothetically, she has her own sort of fairy house within the other world. Yeah. She's the head of her own little grouping of fairy and boobox, or I guess in her case, sorry, not boobox. In the case of the Evermothers, the dryads.
Yeah, the dryads, the Elil.
So yeah, that's how I imagine it. It would make sense to me. And also it gives us more space for the game masters who develop stuff to like I don't know if this is the book where we describe the overall structure, but I don't think we're necessarily going to get to every fairy house. Like maybe we name them in this book, but this is not where we these are the houses of the fairy court or whatever. Like it's just like, oh yeah, these houses exist, and this one looks after commerce. They're part of the portfolio and they're aligned to whatever the focus of the.
So I guess let's rewind a second. Let's start. Why are there fairy courts? And I mean, in general mythology, like why do we even talk about fairy courts? Where did this idea even come from?
Sure.
Now I guess go on. Go on.
So from what I know, and please chat, correct me if I'm wrong, or comment in YouTube because I'm just kind of riffing. One of the biggest parts of fairy court is the fact that in traditional literature there were like equivalent kings and queens in mythology, like in Anwen, and of course they must have a court, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a thing. And then another thing is like in popular mythology, as writers sort of adopted these conventions. They flesh it out to be a parallel to like our world, right? Like courts exist in our world, so they must exist. And there were inventions that came from that, such as famously Shakespeare in A Midsummer's Night Dream, right?
Yeah.
Like was it what were their names? Titania and Oberon, and they're like Titania, I think, is a pure invention. Wait, is it Titania? Anyway, the Fairy Queen is a pure invention of Shakespeare. And so on, and how that's organized.
Well, not the Fairy Queen, but Titania, I think, specifically.
Yeah, a Fairy Queen in his place. And correct me if I misspeak, but yes. So yeah, it's a parallel to the way we used to organize ourselves in this world. So they thought it must exist in that world as well.
Yeah,
right?
And I think on the one hand, it's obviously a reflection to how societies were organized in the times where these tales were being told. But it also is a natural consequence of fairy lore as well. Like, many folk believe that the Fae were reincarnated spirits of people, right? So if they're like people, then would they not also behave like people, right?
Right.
So I don't think that's unreasonable. Actually, I do have a quote that I can read on stream. From the book.
You do.
That book you recommended to me. Where is it?
Oh yes.
British folklore. I'm backwards on the stream because of Discord, so apologies for that. I haven't found a way to fix it, but yeah. British folklore, myths and legends by Mark Alexander. When was this book published? This book was published.
83.
83. Sure.
Is it?
Oh, yep. And I have a part here that I wanted to read while I butcher this book.
That book is a banger, by the way. If you like fairy folklore and British folklore and history and stuff, it's a good one. So we recommend
I just
it.
realized let me change the screen so that people can actually see what I'm talking about. We are professional streamers. We are not professional streamers.
That's definitely not true. We're definitely not professional streamers.
Yeah.
We are professional game designers and writers who like this.
I guess this artwork isn't actually Twitch friendly technically, although I don't know what Twitch feels about art and artistic beauty and the depiction of nudity. I guess I'll censor it with my finger. Maybe I just won't show it, even though the artwork's beautiful. Sorry guys, you can just look it up. It's Titania by John Simmons, 1866. Beautiful artwork. Anyway, quotes. They are distributed in tribes and orders, and have children, nurses, marriages, deaths, and burials, in appearance even as we. Now, this is a quote from Reverend Robert Kirk in his quote, The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies, which he published in 1691. And it goes on further to say, quote, the Faerie live a life very much like our own, with clothing similar to that of people whose country in which they live. These subterraneans have controversies, doubts, disputes, feuds, and siding of parties, there being some ignorance in all creatures, and the vastest, greatest intelligence not compassing all things. So this chap, Reverend Robert Kirk, in 1691, I believe he's credited to be one of the first to record first-hand folklore tales about the Fae. So he went about Scotland and spoke to the common folk and recorded the tales they had. And that quote comes from his book, where he's saying, yeah, basically, the Fae were very much like people.
And that's a true. Well, wait, real quick, I want to touch on some comments. Pigeon Palace says, what was the title again? They're interested. And Sylvia said they have that book already. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
So yeah, of course you do. Well done. Nice. I'll type the title in chat. British folklore, myths, and legends by Mark Alexander. Kurt found it first in his local library, believe it or not, in Japan, and then recommended it to me, and then I bought it. Now, admittedly, it's not. I mean, I will tell you up front that much of the book is not about like Celtic Iron Age stuff. It begins there and then kind of then goes into like modern Britain, but then it does go back to like the pagan inheritance, like the pagan revivalism and things like that. So it's really about general folklore, not just about creatures and things, although it does have a lot of that in there. And if you meant what was the book that I quoted from, because that quote I read is not this book. This book is then quoting the book by the Scottish chap from 1691. That book has a different title. That book is entitled I
think Pigeon meant the British Folklore Myths and Legends book. And there's another one. There's if you do a Google search on sacredtext.com, which is a great resource, by the way.
Yes.
It's like a fucking GeoCities page, but please donate to it or buy their things in order to keep it alive. But they also have an interesting book there called Celtic Faerie Faith. And that's if you ever read that or looked through it, that's a really interesting book, because what you're talking about first-hand accounts of the Faerie, again, as rationalists, as people in the modern world where we believe in science and all this stuff, we know fairies aren't real, so to speak.
What? This news to me.
So to speak. But it's really cool because, in that book, it's like written in 1913, and it's gathering like also first-hand accounts and so on. And up until the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, people just took it for granted that fairies are a thing, and that book was trying to reconcile Christian faith with like fairy faith.
Mm-hmm.
But up until our grandfathers, great grandfathers generation, right? Was that right? Or great great grandfathers generation?
Yeah.
Fairies were just fairies exist, and you just know fairies exist. And probably even my grandparents, they were superstitious too. And there's still people superstitious now. No, it's interesting. It's still a part of our lives. It's always been a part of our lives. And the way fairies, we think about fairies, they're very close to us culturally. They're not just a thing where it's like, a villain in a monster's manual. It's part of our culture as folklorists and people, fans of fantasy. So that's why it's important to understand these things. And they were just like us. Like you said, Jared, they were supposed to be human. They have passions like humans do.
And ambition and things. So loads of like Welsh, Celtic, and Irish tales all detail many different fairy courts that the Fae respect titles of humans. Even like one king would meet another king. A king of Mortogord would be a king of the other world. They would have leaders, but then you also still have the tricksy fae that you would meet in the forest, right? That clearly isn't a member of like a court wearing like some kind of suit or dress or whatever. They're just some kind of little gremlin that's running around doing chaotic things. So there's still a wide range of fae experience that mortals have, and that in itself makes the fae confusing, and we kind of have to encompass all of that, which we will do. There's one other thing I wanted to say as well, but now I've forgotten. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Sure.
Yeah, I forget. Anyway,
it was taken by a fairy.
Yeah.
They were just like, we can't let you know that information publicly. So they stamped it from your brain.
So that's the folkloric depiction of fae courts, where like that they exist. Why we think there were fae courts, and talking about all the tales that had them. But then why does our world have fairy courts? Now, obviously, we're inspired by the original Celtic mythology, so we have to have fairy courts. But then, what purpose do they serve? Well, I think we talked about this in the previous video about our gods, the Ever Ones. You go back and check that. But briefly, you go on.
Well, we do mention it in the core rule book that Solus Tag, part of the responsibility is that the Ever Ones banish the Faeseeker to the other world, and part of the responsibility is to make sure that those incursions don't happen again. So we don't say it directly, but it's implied that there are guardians from a lot of shit happening in the other world from spilling into the mortal realm, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, they're guardians in the other world, basically. They serve the gods, protecting their paradise, their region in the other world from mal actors, bad spirits, monsters, creatures, banshee, Bugane, dragons, that kind of thing. It's just a constant battle up there, really, in a way. And then, so our fae, the spirits of people reincarnated, the spirits guided by the fae of the other world to their god, their Ever One, and then that Ever One, if the spirit is worthy, they'll shape them into a fae of their type, their progeny. Each god has their own kind of fae. And they're newborn fae, I guess. And I don't imagine they immediately get shuffled into a house, right? They don't join the court, the Celtic. They're just... I think those, the newborn fae, are the ones you might likely find wandering back into the real world, perhaps. Because they're so close to it still, they're still attached. They might want to try and find their way back. Maybe they're still in denial about their own death. Maybe they have some animosity towards humans. And I can imagine that those would be the ones that you'd often find wandering the mortal world. And then you have the other kinds as well that just want to mess around and play with humans. I imagine that once the fae kind of get more mature and older, I don't know how long that takes, but they might still want to go on a little jaunt into Avallen to have some fun with some people, because why wouldn't you? If you have all these powers and abilities that can do tricks, and who knows? You've probably heard of stories of fae tricking people when you were a human, so it's the done thing. It might just be a tradition that's carried on. It's a sport and games of such. And then once a fae kind of lives long enough and survives in the other world, because they themselves can be killed or destroyed, then I imagine they might gain the attention of one of the fae houses, right? And they might start being brought in to serve a purpose, a larger purpose than just wandering the other world and having games and having fun and actually upkeeping the things. I imagine there's like this kind of draw that as a fae gets older, it's more likely to get drafted in to be doing these important maintenance activities, essentially, in the other world. And they might join a house, and then they will have their Telwith Tag, the noble that they serve under, in a way. And maybe, those Telwith Tag will die eventually. Not because of old age, but I imagine they'll come into conflict. One day they might battle with an Iskatheodwyn and lose, right? And then another fae would have to be promoted in their place, right? So I guess that would be drawn on from the house, and so the cycle goes on. So is that how you imagine it as well? Do you think that's kind of where our heads at?
Yeah, largely. We're still... I think it's important to have any kind of... So this is kind of... I'm putting on my writer's template, right?
Yeah.
So as we build worlds and we draw from folklore and so on, an important part is knowing that there's things we don't know, and stressing that there's space for things to be developed for the dungeon master, for the game master, and for writers who want to explore this world, but giving enough that it's interesting, right?
Yeah. I'd say there's like 3 levels to it, right? There's things. Well, actually, there's 4 levels to it, right? There's things that players don't know. Let's go the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
There's things that we don't know as the world creators, right? That we haven't decided yet, that we're leaving open to the future because we don't want to close every door and write ourselves into corners, right? Then
and the reason you don't want to do that, is you just start focusing on the wrong things that makes your world exciting, right? And I think anyway, maybe some writers like that, but I don't like that. I like to keep it open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like, we only briefly mentioned the fairy courts in the first book, right? And then in the campaign book, we just introduced the fairy queen as one of the members of one of these fey courts, and we kind of left that space open because we weren't touching on it then, so there was no need to solidify it until now. Now we're writing a whole book about it, so now we can imagine if we made all decisions before, and now we're writing a whole book about it. We're like, oh god, I wish we didn't do that way. I wish it could be this way. That would have really been a hindrance, but now we're here, so yeah, that's why you don't answer every question. Anyway, yes, there's things that we don't even know yet that haven't been decided. Then there are things that the GM won't know. These are things that aren't put into the book, that are left mysteries even for the game master. There might be things that we know, or we have intentions for. They might be hinted towards, but they won't be drawn out in the book. And that's because, like you just said, like you want the game master to have space to be creative and have their own things. If we leave mysteries for the game master, they can fill those in and have fun with it, and we don't want it to be so strict that because that's one of the troubles I find with playing in other spaces, like playing in a role-playing game of Lord of the Rings. Well, if you play in the past, you know what's going to happen in the future, right? You can't rub against that, and you don't want to say, oh, this character did this, so you can't do that. And that's one of the reasons why our world of Avallen isn't strictly historical Britain, right? Because we don't want to have to be constrained by the actual clans, the actual tribes, the actual people that were there at the time. So yes, there's things that we know that the GM doesn't know because it won't be in the book. And then there are things that the GM does know that the players don't know. Right? So there'll be a player-facing section. There's information that the GMs get, but the players aren't supposed to know it unless the GM reveals it to them. And yeah, so I guess that's the 4 levels. Things we don't know, things that the GM doesn't know, things that I guess there's only 3 levels then. Yeah.
No, things that players don't know, and then there are things that the 4th level would just be knowledge, right? Like things everybody knows.
Sure, yeah, things everybody knows.
Yeah. And then those 2 levels are like, so, and basically a source book is the type of writing are the things that everyone knows, because you're saying this is what everyone knows and the players know it. And then you're saying this is game master's information only. So it works on these 2 levels.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think how we got on this topic was you were alluding to, I've just like kind of outlined this general way that a Fae's life might progress. And I think you're saying, well, let's not codify that, right? Let's not say this is how things are done. We might generally hint at it and say that, this might be a typical life of a Fae, but it's not like a set in stone ladder of like,
Unless we have a compelling reason to, right? Mm-hmm. Like if it's compelling and we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and this is kind of how it has to be. But that's not how fantasy folklore has always been either, and maybe that's we need to leave ourselves a little space. There's parts of this, we have a lot of stuff written already, and we have things lying in the background. But there's certain things like that where like, okay, well, how deep into the ecology life cycle of a Fae do we need to get? I don't think this is the book where we get into the life and death of a life cycle of a Fae, but we do get into the social aaspects of it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's still useful for the GM to know, like, roughly that yes, Fae can die. That the Telworth Take are a special kind of Fae. They're usually older and more mature. Like, these kind of generalizations might be a sentence here and there, but it's not going to be in-depth anatomy of a Fae and a Fae's life, right?
Yeah, it's a sociology book, not a biology book.
Yes, yeah.
It's writing.
So then, I guess let's go the other way. Now, what do we want the GMs to know about fairy courts? And what questions do we want to answer?
Okay. Should I just start? Is that okay?
Yeah. Just listen.
And actually, so in Delphia and Pigeon, if there are things you want to know, you can ask the question. And if there are things from the Discord, did we ask that from the Discord?
Yes, we did. We get one good response that I can go into later if you want.
Okay, so yeah, when you're ready, just bring that up.
Yeah, okay.
But if you have any questions that you have, let us know, because I think we can decide whether or not we can answer that now.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that I do want to share with people are the fact that there are 5 main fairy courts, and they each have a name.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are named. Yeah, they are named, and we want to go into how the Tilitheg of each of the fairy courts is different.
So how the Tilitheg in each court are different. Yeah, how the Tilitheg.
Yeah, and what their and how their noble houses are fair. Are different, and how they sort of are organized. Another thing I want to touch on, and maybe not get too deeply into, is whether or not and how fairy courts interact with each other, if they do. Which I do think there is some of that. Like, how does, for example, if the Evermother wants to communicate with the Everfather,
mm-hmm.
I imagine Tilitheg are the branch of communication. Like, likewise, what are the mechanics and politics involved there? Briefly, this is not like, but touching on the sort of inter-court, inter-unwin, these pockets of the other world, how they sort of interact is something that the game master should know, but not necessarily the player.
And similarly, how the gods interact with humans, I imagine, would often be mediated by Fae. I don't think when a druid hears from the Evermother, I don't think it's often the Evermother whispering to them directly. I think it's often
one of their
second of the Tilitheg comes down and gives a vision or a message or that kind of thing. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Pigeon is saying that general hierarchy set up kind of like in the core book with Valak and Rex. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we're touching on now, I think. Now the one fairy core that we're working on today and that we can sort of flesh out a little bit on stream, time we have left. The current name for it is, can I reveal the name? Is it okay with you, Darren?
Yeah, but this is your, you can reveal your draft name. I don't think we've even discussed this yet. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
I still might veto it, guys, is what I'm hinting at there. As I'm like, no, I want it to be this instead. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. But it has to do with the discipline, and the the Everchild, whose portfolio of worship kind of has to do with commerce and technology and tricks and so on, is the Court of Coins. So the Everchild is like the sort of two-faced, not two-faced in a negative sense, but rather the sort of what do you call it? Dialectical, two-sided, the most two-sided gods with two aspects to their personality. What's up, Wisty Melon? Welcome to the chat if you're not a bot, and get out of the chat if you are a bot.
Yeah, yes,
but you wouldn't know that if you're a bot. So we're talking about fairy courts. And so the Everchild's fairy court is currently named. Our current term for it is the Court of Coins.
Yeah. So why do you? So my immediate response to that is, when did this name come about? Wouldn't it have been formed before coins? Like, coins were really a thing in Avallen?
So that's a really good question. Yeah. So there's this aspect.
Okay. Wisdom Middle is not a bot, or unless they're a very flattered bot. Yeah. They're getting more advanced.
Great. Yeah, if you are a flattered bot, that'd be amazing. Yeah. So there's also something kind of anachronistic about the courts, which is kind of strange, right? Where the courts. Okay, this is my headcanon, and you tell me whether or not I'm wrong in this.
Yeah.
The courts come from the ancient Briandel, right? When they held court on Earth, and then they entered the other world, and so on. However, unlike Avallen, the mortal world, they have some knowledge, and they're interested in knowledge of the outer world, of other spaces. They're more aware of the bigger world than their subjects are, to a certain extent.
Yes, I mean, by definition, they were once mortals, so they've experienced the mortal realm, and now they are shepherds, guardians of the other world.
Yeah. And so they might not travel to, like, the Everchild especially. There's a story about them bringing wine back to Avallen that we're developing right now, and they are more aware of the other cultures and so on. So there's something anachronistic about it. You're right. Valak culture doesn't have coins, but it's dynamic. So the courts are also more dynamic than previous. Than how we treat the stories in our world. This is how I view the courts. These are living, breathing things. These are Seelie courts, and they're new, they're recent, in the sort of they're contemporaneous with the court. So they're calling themselves the Court of Coins, not because they're ancient, but because this is how the court is right now. They're concerned with commerce. They're concerned with tech. They're concerned with.
Are you suggesting that there once was another name and that they've?
Yeah, there could be.
Okay.
They could have been the court.
My objective to Court of Coins is this idea that that they're concerned with commerce and things like that. Like I think it's Court of Coins sounds too like subsidiary to like a greater purpose. Like why? I mean, are we going to write that Everchild's Fae as being obsessed with coins? Like, is that where we're going?
Well,
that doesn't. Well,
feel... no. Well,
it seems too mortal. To like the wants of a mortal is to gain coins and money. Ha ha ha.
Sure.
Influence, but I feel like they should be bigger than that. It does sound cool though, I must admit. Like I've written down here, like already Court of Treasures or Court of Games. Like it's not that not a similar space. What's your
Yeah, but those also don't alliterate.
Yeah.
And the other aspect of coins is the adoption of the coins as being, and you're right. Maybe there's another name for before. Maybe it was the Court of Riches. Maybe it was the Court of Gold. Whatever it is, but the aspect of the coin fits the Everchild's personality extremely well, right? Of this two-sided thing that's embracing new technologies.
Also, where did you get this idea of the Everchild being two-sided? I don't have that impression. I just have like they have one side. It's tricks, games, and fun, right? They don't lie and present a false face to people. They're always tricksy, right? And
I guess when I say two-faced, I'm not necessarily saying two-faced in the sense of we say two-faced as in good and bad, but there's this interesting dynamic aspect of the Everchild where they're a child, but they're not, right? They're like this there's this eternally youthful creature, person, thing, entity that is both youthful and eternal. And there's this tension there.
Yeah. I call it duality as well. I think that's okay. But I don't think that the double-sided coin has like anyway. Let's not do this now. I don't think we should do this now. I think we should move on to fairy courts and like name. Sure, Everchild's Court of Coins. Maybe we could put it in there. Come on to it later. We don't have to set
sure.
But we can talk about the fairy court now. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. Maybe it's the so Zilphia is suggesting maybe it's the Everchild's current obsession, and maybe call it a fantasy instead of an obsession. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
I mean, kids love collecting stuff, right? The Everchild could be a coin collector at the moment.
They're just
to source coins from all over the world. Yeah,
obsessed with it right now. Yeah. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So you started. So go ahead. Redirect it to the thing you want to focus on.
Yeah. So what do we want to focus on? So yeah, I think what Pigeon said is like the general hierarchy. Like, what are we imagining? What does this court look like? Who's a part of this court? What do they do? Do we even have to define that? Like, are there going to be set roles?
Okay. We can talk about things now and not be. We're going to talk about things now. The things that I thought about. And things that you thought about, but not necessarily be beholden to putting into the book. And the thing that I thought about is basically, yes, it is the Everchild. For example, if I'm using the Everchild, because that's the one I thought about the most because I'm writing a draft about it. If it's the Everchild's court, for example, the Everchild has their court, they have their castle, where the court is, their equivalent of the castle.
I guess actually I want to add two things in it before you continue, is that one, I do imagine that there must be some differences between the courts. They can't all be set up the same way, right? Like one court might have this role, another court might not have that role. Like the Everchild's court should be different to the Evermother's court, right? Because it's a different being that do things differently. And then two, our gods are not like the Abrahamic God, who's like omnipotent and omniscient, right? They can't be everywhere all at once, and they can't do anything whenever they want to. That's why you need other beings with you, under you, to support you and do things for you, right? That's the purpose of the court. Is to be the right hand, left hand, agents, eyes, ears, actors, doers, warriors, diplomats for this powerful being, right? That's what the purpose is.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my two little caveats here. Continue. Sorry.
Well, yeah, and I imagine that their courts, the roles in it, would be aligned to the interest of whatever that everyone is interested in, right? So the Everchild, for example, is interested in commerce, and it might be interested in games, might be interested in tricks or whatever, scheming or whatever that is. And so the fairy houses or the heads of houses would be organized, coalesce around these ideas that they care about, right? And it might not be equal, because maybe the Ever Stranger has fewer, right, than the Everchild, for example. And so they need fewer houses and fewer generals or whatever.
Yeah.
But the houses are serving to... and maybe there could be a more general one, because maybe they do make war against the Teleteg or whatever. Maybe there's some houses that are more like warrior or military or whatever it may be, you know. But that's kind of what I imagine, is they're coalesced around the concepts that god cares about, and that's what the Teleteg care about, or that's what Teleteg, their responsibilities are to the Everone, is to make sure that they're each focused around serving that god's interest.
Yeah,
but
so I just wrote down here Duke of Games, Duke of Coins, and Duke of Tricks. Like I'm not really attached to that immediately, but I just like the idea that, like, so all the fairy courts are made up of Teleteg. These are our most powerful of Fae, the noble Fae. They're almost like demigods in a way, right? And each court has Teleteg, but I feel like each court should have like a title associated with it.
Sure.
So you could say the Duke of blah blah blah, and anyone who's in the know would know, oh, actually that's the Everchild's court, right? No other court has dukes in it, for example.
Sure.
And that can be like a way of titling of what court you're a part of. I don't like the name Duke already, but I just wrote down like some kind of title. And then if each of the things have a role that does a certain thing, well, now we get these cool ideas of like Duke of Games, right? And then obviously the Evermother's court's not going to have a Duke or a member of Games. They'll have the Saint of Flowers or whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure. Whatever titles we choose. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind too. For example, if you did use Duke, which, you know, again, you said you're not really into it, but the way we're organizing these courts is more similar to what our view that we've inherited from the literature, which was written post-Abrahamic, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of this writing comes from
medievalist
literature. But if we don't do it in this way, it doesn't feel like the kind of fairy courts that we know. So, to a certain extent, even though our world of Avallen is Iron Age oriented, or takes place in the Iron Age, the courts are kind of anachronistic in a way.
Yeah.
Because, and drawing from a later tradition, which I'm rationalizing as they're fucking in the, you know, they're more forward thinking in a way. And eventually that'll seep into the real into
I think I like the idea, because the Fae are, I mean, some stories and tales call the Fae the ever living ones, which is where I got the name of ever ones from, for the gods, right? So they don't die of natural causes, so they live far longer, hundreds and hundreds of years. And so I really like the idea that their hierarchy and their culture and way of speaking should seem very alien and distant from the modern Valak people. It should seem weird, and that translates in the game to the players. Like, when I imagine how this plays out, is the GM knows that, oh, the Everchild's court has dukes in it. There's a Duke of Games and things like that, and Duke of Coins and the Duke of Tricks. But the players, they don't know that, and they might one day hear of the like Epona, the Duke of Games, and it's like, what the hell is that? They won't even know whose court it's a part of, you know. They just know that's his title, and they know that in Avallen there are no dukes, right? There's Brenin, there's Rhaegar, there's emperors.
Yeah. There's barely there's kings, but they're not kings in the same sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the way the fairy, so that's something I think we both agree on, right?
Yeah.
The way the fairies are organized in the other world in Avallen is more like medievalist organization.
And we've already kind of established that, because we have the fairy queen, right? And there are no queens of Avallen. There are Brenin. They declare as the Brenin of the Penvive. But
which is inspired by medieval literature, arguably, or rather. So there's we've already done that. So yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I can write that down then. So we're basically saying that these are demigod-like demidog, demigods like Fae, who advise and take action for the god / everyone. They have roles to fulfill in the court, but each court is different, right? Each court is different and has different titles that seem alien and strange to modern Barlic and Praxians. So, like, don't use Brennan, Breyer, Briangle, because they are Barlic terms. Yeah, don't use Brennan, Breyer, or I guess even Emperor, Praetor, like all this kind of stuff, because they are mortal terms. Iron Age mortal terms, mortal terms.
Yeah, one thing I can imagine, for example, I mean, it hasn't happened yet, and you tell me, Darren, if this is stupid or not. I would love it if, like, one day, like in an adventure, a Pencower Telesteg had a crossbow. Yeah, such a thing does not exist.
Yeah, I'm kind of down for that. And it's like a magical artifact. It's like, yeah, if you can get that Fae and get that thing, you've got something no one else has got. Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that.
But you can't buy a crossbow in Avallen. It doesn't exist, so it's like a high level artifact.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of obvious. So there's an anachronistic aspect to the fairy world that I like.
Okay. And then we're saying, go on, sorry.
And we can only do this because of our emphasis on Iron Age culture, right? Yes. Like the game master has a bigger playground to play with the other world because of our shared cultural knowledge about them and where it's coming from. And I think that's fun. I think that's really interesting, personally.
And then we're saying houses. We're saying that some, maybe not all, but some Felwith Plague have subordinate Fae within their influence. And these constitute that Felwith Plague's house. Or in Welsh it'd be T. Welsh. I don't know if we'd use that, but I mean we could do. For example, the house of Ipona or Ipona T.
And here's another big point. So Darren mentioned his name, Ipona, right? Who is the traditional one of the most famous Celtic goddesses. Having to do with horses, because horses were very important for travel and commerce and all that stuff. So horses were important, right? Mm-hmm. So this is also the place where we try to put in named gods or figures. They might not necessarily have the same name, but clearly there's going to be a god that is aligned with something that we read in literature and so on. And this is a place where we can play with that a little bit, and game masters play with it, I think. But yes, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I was originally slightly hesitant towards it, but then I've kind of come on board. Let's go to my artbook. When I first made Avallen, I knew that I didn't want to base it directly onto real world cultures and names. I didn't want to have actual clans from Celtic Britain be represented in the world. I wanted our own clans that were inspired by them that could be different and weren't beholden to them. And I did the same thing with the gods as well. I didn't want to have, and also there's so many Celtic gods to choose from. Like you have the Welsh ones, the Irish ones, Scottish ones, Germanic ones, Iberian ones, so on and so forth. And then which do you use? And then even inside one culture, there's so many. So what do we do there? I ended up kind of like deciding that, well, there's general themes. I can condense the themes down to one deity and say that deity is inspired by all these different places. So, for example, the Ever Elder is our goddess of water, secrets, knowledge. And I wrote here in the art book she was inspired by the historical Celtic gods Llŷr and Don. Don's like the mother goddess, like the mother of all gods in Irish and Welsh mythology, and she's a water goddess as well. So I said they're inspired here, and made 5 gods. But now we're saying that these gods have fairy courts, and in those fairy courts there are many other arch-fae, and they're going to need names. And we have all these figures that are in real mythology, and people kind of expect those names as well. And there is precedent to this as well. There's like beings and stories about beings and creatures that today they might be called heroes or they might be called fae, and it's perhaps possible that they were one day gods, and then as the stories have been told and survived through the ages, they kind of been like, I don't want to say demoted, but being converted from gods into fae. But there's definitely a relationship here between gods and fae, and in our world it's the same as well. Like our gods, in a way, you might just argue they're just really powerful fae, or that powerful fae are like lesser demi-gods, right? There's kind of, it's quite fungible. So I'm becoming more open to the idea that we have all these sources to draw on. Do we want to have a water Telwyth Teg archfey that is called Don? Maybe.
Yep.
Now, also maybe not, because she's like meant to be the mother of gods, and it'd be weird to make her a fae. And I think in the end, what I decided was that each of our gods has a true name. Like she's called the Ever Elder, but she has her own like real name that's kind of been forgotten. And I think the Ever Elder's true name is Llŷr Don, which is named after these deities. So it might be the case that we save like some of the biggest gods' names to be the names of our Ever ones. But then for like Epona, it's like a goddess of horses, like a specific kind of thing. She's clearly not a mother and deity of all deities. She's just of I want to say a lower level, but that's kind of how gods are structured, right? You have the god of horses, the god of trade. It's kind of like a smaller domain. Then I'm kind of interested in naming these gods those names, because I mean we have to get names from somewhere. We want them to be Celtic mythologically inspired, and this is like a great place to source them from. I think Zilvi's got a great message in the chat, Kurt. You can read that out when I get some water.
Yeah, Tuatha are very much like that. If I'm saying it correctly, I always say words incorrectly. Big discussion of whether they're fair or not, and do the Fae come from them, and so on. And like that's an interesting thing too, because like when you talk about Celtic mythology, there's levels to it. And the Irish mythology, arguably, like it's Celtic, but so is Welsh mythology, and they inspire they've informed. Irish mythology is very much informed by Celtic mythology, and where things come from is unclear because so much of it's not written down. And there's so many gods that are gods that we only know because there's like a picture of them, like in that British mythology book. They have a statue covering of Essos, right? Is it Essos? I think I'm thinking of.
I'm not sure.
There's like one carving, and we know that's a god, but we don't know anything else about him except for his name, and there's a picture of him. And so there's lots of stuff like that, right? Where it's very much open interpretation. And that's interesting, and that's part of the mythology that we can share with people. These names. And a lot of fantasy games do that, right? There's a lot of games that have fairies or gods or goddesses named after a lot of these figures. So we wouldn't be the first using these names, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I think it's interesting, and what we're doing is we're saying we're codifying it a little bit, but that's in order to sort of draw to real world inspirations and let people know that yes, we're aware of these things, and your characters can sort of feel that they're connected to the source material in this way.
Just checking something.
Sure. The person the bot you banned? Was that a bot you banned?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry, with Avallen, you're still clear. You're good, bro.
Yeah.
But for Gal,
I was checking. So I remember I gave a name for the Ever Stranger in Against the Faerie Queen. Spoilers. And I wanted to check where I got that name from, because I also have names for them somewhere in my notes as well. I should put this off stream. It's not my personal document. I'll do that another time. So I do like the idea of like using minor gods for names of members of the Fae courts for sure. So in Where are we? So in light of that, I have another book here. Again, apologies that it's backwards, but this is the Element Encyclopedia of the Celts. This book's great. It's kind of difficult to read because it is like an encyclopedia where everything's in alphabetical order, except it's not completely in alphabetical order because it's alphabetical order for different sections. So there's different groupings in the book. There's Celtic people and lifestyle, Celtic places, Celtic religion, myths, legends and stories, symbols, ideas and archetypes, which is really useful. Celtic twilight and revival, and then each of those sections has like an encyclopedia in it. And if we go to Celtic religion, page 207, there's a bunch of gods in here, dude. There's so many. Like the first entry is Abnoba, and it just notes Abnoba. It's one sentence: a huntress goddess of the Black Forest in Germany. She is accompanied by a hunting dog, and that's all that's noted.
Yeah, that's all we know.
Yeah,
that's all we know.
That's probably is all we know. And it's like, yeah, great. There probably should be either a Fae of the Evermother's Court, because it's in the forest, and she should be a huntress, and her name should be Abnoba, and that's just cool, right? We've got a name. She's got some kind of source from a Celtic god, and yeah, like I'm okay with that. I think that's okay, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think actively, because we are also sort of saying to people that this is very much a folkloric inspired fantasy world, and the only way to be folklorically inspired is to draw from the folklore, and we want people to know that. Yeah. Like, we are fans of this stuff, and we want to share it with people. And it's always going to be filtered, right? Because you can't just reprint the encyclopedia in a game book and it's going to be useful. It has to be filtered through our sensibility, and that's what we're offering with things that we're making.
And we've already established as well that the Telwyth Teg are kind of powerful. They are like demigods, and the Varlic people do worship them, kind of like saints in Catholicism, I guess, and other things. Like, we know that the Penbythe hunters and warriors did worship the Faerie Queen, right? Because the Evermother's a pacifist. So who do you pray to if you're a member of the Penbythe clan in times of war? Well, it was the Faerie Queen, her former general, and spoiler, the campaign is called against the Faerie Queen. Well, now she's gone. Who do they worship in her stead? Well, I imagine there'll be a different Telwyth Teg that's now taken on that role, right? That's something we could talk about too, perhaps in the book.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, like that. But most of the Faerie Queen worshippers don't know. They don't consciously know that it's changed, but then like new gods rise all the time, right? And so, there's like a mechanism by which.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, it must be passed down to the druids, right? Okay.
Exactly. There's a vision, right? Like, there's a vision offered. Who offers the druids visions?
Yeah.
The Telwyth Teg.
And like the Evermother, once that betrayal happened, like there's no way that she's going to be okay with her people still worshipping the Faerie Queen, right? Without knowing what happened. So she's going to be very invested in sharing that, at least sharing that she has fallen from grace, right? And now you should worship Andraste instead, who is, quote, a war goddess in Britain, according to Dave Cassius. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So. I think that stuff is. I will make a note about that. We want to make a note about whether or not to make a note about that as an aftermath.
Oh right. Aftermath.
I don't have my computer. I can't type anything.
Yeah, sure. Now, aftermath of the Faerie Queens.
I literally got out of my car from the script we made, and I just like.
Oh, for grace. The Evermother would not abide her continued worship. Which Fae would now take her place in the Faerie Court. Faerie Court of Flowers. Faerie Court of Flowers, or whatever we call it.
Whatever we have to.
Maybe Petals is nicer. Petals. The Court of Petals. Which Fae would now take a place in competence and become a Telwyth Teg. Speaking of, I just flipped through the page and I found your lady Epona.
She's a big deal. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes these are, horses are just like another animal farm. But horses, they were they were wealth. They represented wealth. They represented trade. They represented commerce. They represented tons of things for Celtic society, I imagine. So it makes sense why she was worshipped and propagated, because she, you know.
It says some features connect her with fertility and prosperity. Many of the worshippers who made dedications to her were soldiers, especially cavalrymen. She is shown nearly always riding side saddle on a horse, or in the company of horses, but there are only a few representations of her in Britain. Like the mother goddesses, Epona is sometimes associated with death as well, and she appears in cemeteries in Gaul. She seems to have been worshipped mainly in rural and domestic settings. The Celts regularly used mares as work animals on their farms. Epona was probably a patron saint of horse breeding and regarded as the protectress of horsemen. She was also associated with healing waters, and some of them she was shown naked like a nymph. Epona is distinctive among the Celtic gods and goddesses in being mentioned by Roman writers. Writers Juvenal and Minucius Felix describe her as presiding over stables. Yeah, so she's definitely... And I think people have equated the Welsh mythological figure Rhiannon with Epona, saying she's like the Welsh version of Epona. I'm okay with having both of them. We can have both, right?
Sure. Yeah. We'll make choices and see what we like, but yeah, I think it's fun. I think it's cool to draw on that stuff.
Okay.
I didn't pick up that book. I've seen it. I haven't picked it up yet.
Yeah.
So you're right. Yeah, it's a good one.
Shall we? So let's call them dukes for now, but we might change it to now. But what roles do we think the Everchild's court might have? I read on Duke of Games, Duke of Coins, Duke of Tricks. Is that something we're imagining, or do we think it's more of like, I don't know, like who shepherds in the souls and who guards the perimeter and that kind of thing?
No, I think you should keep that stuff a little bit more open, because...
Are you saying don't include it? I was imagining that we would, like, at the very least, have a list of, like, these are the names of some Talwith Taig that are in the Everchild's court. These are their titles. And then we might not go into much more than that.
But what I'm saying is you don't want to say, like, Brand is the Duke of Coins, and it's his job to make sure he interviews every spirit that comes.
Right. Yeah, make sure.
Unless it's really effective. Like maybe there's maybe the Everstranger has it, right? Maybe the Everstranger has one that's associated with that in death. I don't know. You know, it's that's something we have to explore, and what feels.
Yeah. So you're right. This might fall into the category of where we can leave this open for GMs to play with itself, and our job is to set the kind of boundary of what these courts do, and then have cool names that inspire you.
Yeah.
Right.
Because ultimately, it's still a form of storytelling, right?
Yeah.
We have to say like what feels interesting to talk about and to share, and what feels important. What we don't want it to read as specifically is, I think, this book anyway is the handbook and a job responsibility book for each of the courts. But I think what you're talking about, where you have like a Duke of so and so or a so and so, and they mainly concern themselves with facilitating prayers for trade and for blessings and stuff like that for merchants, that can be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
But I think an important one that maybe each court has is a warrior class of some sort, or a warrior house, or warrior houses.
Yeah.
That either protect their domain from intrusion, and or in hunting, continuing the wild hunt to make sure they can cull the numbers of like a beast that would sort of overrun the rule of the.
Yeah. So I immediately, as soon as you said that, like, my brain sparked with ideas, and I was like, oh yeah, for the Everfather's court, it should be like, I don't know what his freaking title is, but the Earl of Warriors, right? But for the Evermother's court, it would be the I forgot what I used earlier for the Mother, but it can be a random medieval title.
Sure, the Chancellors.
The Chancellor of Hunts, right?
Yeah.
And then for their Everchild, I imagine it would be already written down there. I think it'd be the Duke of Tricks, like, because they don't hunt, they don't fight, cower, they trick them, right? That's how they
Yeah,
defend
they use
themselves. Yeah.
these traps and inventions and so
Yeah.
sure, yeah, exactly. And that's what I imagine, right? You just kind of have the idea of how they would do a thing and be responsible for it, and then we can put a few sentences for each of the courts about generally how to think about how they do the responsibilities.
Well, because the important thing is we want the GM to have the power to be like, okay, I'm doing this kind of adventure with the Everchild's Faerie Court. Who would be the Talwith Tay that they might come into contact with, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we don't want to be looking at the list and going, oh, is it the Duke of Coins or is it the Duke of Tricks? Like, I don't know. What do they do? I don't know. We should have like something there to say like generally, oh.
Yeah. But that's why people are buying the book, right? Because we want to give enough information that they feel confident that they can like there's personalities they can use. There's information about generally what they're like and what they do and so on. So, yeah. They're just like little They're basically, just additional otherworldly NPCs that they have the potential to interact with.
I wrote down Duke of Jokes, and I was like, what are they? I was like, they're the diplomat. The Everchild sends the Duke of Jokes to talk to all the other people and like just pisses everyone off. And
yeah.
That feels right.
The jester, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, we'll nail these naming conventions, but that's how we imagine it.
Yeah, that's how I'm imagining it. Yeah. And then how many do we think? Like, I feel like 10 is like too much, but I imagine it could be like 10. But we should do like 5 or 6, right? Probably.
I'm oriented it to whatever we think their portfolios are. If it's based around their ideas, if the Everchild has like, if we say that in their domain there's like 6 or 7 like things they really care about, then it's 6 or 7 houses.
Yeah.
If the Everstranger only has like 3 or 4 things they really care about, then that's gonna be 3 or 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they're all equal, then sure, then they'll all end up being equal in that way. Or if one has like a lot, like the Everfather for whatever reason, then maybe it's like one house takes care of 2 or 3 things. But somewhere, I think it could be a little bit flexible. It should be flexible. Like maybe some have 3 houses, some have 4 houses, some have 5 houses. Is what I imagine.
Okay, cool. Then I guess now we can move on to the series of questions we had from our Discord when we brought this subject up. I can't click it here. I have to click it on my phone. So excuse me while I look at my phone. If I click it on my computer, then Kurt will disappear because that is how I've set up.
I can look for the questions on Discord.
Sorry, I'm about to get them. Let's see. It was from Diego. I believe he's our buddy in Spain. Oh wait, chat has priority. Pigeon just appeared. Pigeon says, with a specific warrior cast of each court being important and having messages sent to mortals being important, would messages be as to be cast too? Yeah, exactly. So I think, like, you're right actually. Like Duke of Jokes would be, I imagine, a diplomat, so they'd be sending messages, but I don't know if that's to other gods or to people, and if that role is different, like is there a diplomat for gods and then a diplomat for people, like Duke of I don't know, something, blah 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 would be diplomat for humans. So yeah, I definitely think that like we said, like the gods aren't going to be omniscient, right? They don't know everything, they can't be everywhere all the time, so they have to have messages, they have to get the word out to other Fae, to other humans, to other courts. So there has to be someone who's sending messages to Bubak, and the Bubak are floating around all over the place delivering messages. Like that just has to be the way it is, right? I mean, I guess there might be magical means of communications as well, but I think that definitely is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we that's part of the development process. Like how, because again, the Valak Iron Age Welsh Celtic culture is not a writing culture. And so what does it mean for them to communicate and send messages? And that's something that we won't talk about right now, but we have sort of been exploring, like in some of the stuff that we've talked about and been writing for the book, right?
And we have magic, right? And like we could just say, oh, the Everfather has a magic stone and he can communicate with the Ever Stranger whenever he wants. kind of like the American president and the Russian president pick up the phone when there's a nuclear disaster about to happen, and they have a conversation one-on-one, and they fix things, and then they put the phone down. But that, I don't think it lends itself to good stories. I don't think it's really evocative. Like, I think you want the idea that they're distant from each other, and they have to send a message, and the message has to get there.
Sure, and they don't communicate with each other often, but when they have to, it becomes a big deal, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
That would be why you see fairies, fairy circles coming into the world and intruding without as quickly as possible, and not sort of being waylaid by mortals and so on.
And to be clear, that's a part of it as well. Is we imagine that their other worlds are distant from each other, such that it's easier to pass through Avallen. If you're the Ever Child, if you want to get a message to the Ever Mother, you have to send a Fae to give a message to a person, or have the Fae move through Avallen to then end up in the Ever Mother's domain somehow, right? Like the Avallen's the crossroads.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so the message went in Discord from Diego, dearest Diego. He said, I'll read it out bit by bit. He said quite a lot, actually. I love compared mythology, where you draw parallelism between the different myths around the world, gods, archetypes, and so on. For example, the trickster god archetype. The Everchild in Avallen can be compared in parallel to Loki, or the fox's cunning spirit in indigenous American tribes, or the god that brings fire to men, like Prometheus and Maui, very different, distant religions, cultures. The use of archetypes help us better grasp foreign cultures, but there are differences too, of course. So yeah, I really liked his point, but I don't think that's something that I would actually want to do, right? If we're doing... Go on, you tell me what your thoughts are in response to that.
Yeah, that's something... So this is a great point, and it's a really fun thing, but it's something that's outside the scope of this book.
That's what I was about to say, outside the scope of the book, yeah.
Yeah. But it's something we want to explore in the future, with how we imagine the gods or the divinities and pantheons of other cultures on this world that are also parallel to real world history cultures can coexist.
Yeah.
And that's why our world is set up in that way, to facilitate that.
Yeah.
That you have this other world spiritual plane, but it's not one heaven. It's like a force that connects to our world in these kind of pockets.
Yeah. I think it's fun to compare. And I think it is useful for people to say, I think we will have something like that, right? The Everchild is the trickster, the archetypical trickster god. But they are different. They are also the god of ambition and innovation, right? And I don't know, I haven't read about Loki for a long time. I don't know if Loki has innovation and trade as part of their repertoire. I don't think so, right? I just don't think when we write books, there's only so much space, and that would go into an essay that I would write about the Everchild, but it won't go into our source book, because we need to fill space for other things that are relevant to making the games in Avallen, right? Yeah.
Unless we pull shenanigans and we're like, when we explore our world's Norse culture, it's like, whoa, surprise! The Everchild is also Loki.
Diego also said something else as well. I can't remember what it is, but he said, other thing is relationships between the five courts, not only in actual relationships, politics style, but also in how they each think alike or different from each other, what values they share or where they clash. Yeah, that's a really good question. And he's right, and we haven't written that in here, actually, have we?
We touch on this idea, right?
I know, but we haven't said that this stream, have we?
Right, sure. And we do touch on this sort of like actual relationship politics style, and what we're talking about with diplomats and the communication between them and so on. And in terms of how they're developing as like the respective fairy houses, it's the idea of them being focused on, because I guess that's the question. They're each focused on their interests, but do they have places where they clash? And maybe they do, right? Like the Everchild being concerned with like invention and technology, that sort of how much does that clash with the idea of craftsmen and like the Everfather's portfolio or whatever?
Yeah.
And artists. And there could be conflict there, right? And why would there be conflict? Like, what? Hypothetically, I'm not sure if we explore this in the book or not, but an interesting question would be, in what cases would a fairy house basically declare war on another fairy house?
Yeah.
Either from within their other world or in another domain. Like, in which cases would that be an issue?
And I think the way I think about it as to how our world works is, Well, they're not going to declare war because of territorial reasons in the other world, right? They each have their own space. They're not infringing upon each other. They can't even reach each other, so that can't be the issue. But it has to be about the mortal world. It has to be Avallen, and it probably would be because one god believes another god is leading the Valak people astray, right? Taking them in a direction that they don't approve of, that they think would hinder the Valak people in the future, or somehow corrupt the other world, or make things worse.
Right.
And so I imagine the Evermother and her father at the moment would be quite disappointed with the Everchild being quite happy with the Penkawer dismissing the old ways and barely worshipping the Everchild, in fact, perhaps, and allowing these things to be left behind. And they would probably think that the Everchild's not doing a very good job of shepherding the people, and that might then encroach upon the Penbaith and Pendrai clans, right?
Exactly. And there's this precedence in the history of the world, right, of the everyone's politics with the Sorrows, which is they did go to war before because of their disagreements and they're sort of vying for followership and all this stuff. And so that also informs the politics that are happening now, I would imagine. Like,
yeah.
They can't go into open war against each other because of their agreement on the planet.
I suppose, in a way, this section, I mean, we know that in the actual book itself, this section for the Game Master will be in the same section as the God, right? It will be the Everchild would be the section title, and then part of that would be the Everchild's Faerie Courts of games, coins, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
So I think this section, in relation to other courts, kind of will, because the court is a representation of the God itself, right? It's of their wills and wants and wishes. So this will be tied into how the Everchild sees the Evermother, Everfather, Everelder, and Everstranger, and how they see them. Because I think we do plan to have that kind of inter-God relationship advice for the Game Master in that section. So that will play into that, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll also like have notes about how the Everyone sort of interacts with the court. Like, I actually imagine the Everchild rarely being at their court.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I imagine the either the Ever Elder or Ever Stranger never missing it. Like, they're basically always in court and hearing information and getting information and making choices and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, they'll each have a texture that reflects the personalities of their domain.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to write these sections. I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but I'm surprised that we didn't go into actual creating stuff today. Like, we didn't make a Faerie Court, right? But I don't think that's something really we could do on stream because it'll be too detailed. We're gonna be brainstorming different names for each of the dukes and whatever that kind of stuff is. But we have the general outline here about what it's going to be and how it's going to play out in the world. I think. Yeah.
And we've established some important things that have not. We've talked about things that we've talked about on stream that have been talked about in the books yet, right? Like the whole anachronistic aspect of the courts and them being aligned towards, using these conventions that aren't actually existent in.
Oh my god! I've just realised that I've been on side-by-side view this whole time and not screen share. I'm sorry, chat. I've been writing things and you haven't been able to see it. So sorry. I guess it doesn't matter too much. We've been saying it as well, but it hasn't.
Sure.
You've just been staring at our faces. I mean, we are very pretty, so at least you got that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a constellation prize. Yeah. So there's choices that we need to specifically make that. That's part of the writing process. The writing is us codifying these decisions. But I think we have what we talked about. It's useful. It's not stuff that we've have shared publicly.
Yeah, but now I'm really excited. I just want to get off stream and start delving onto all the Celtic deities and divide them into the different.
Yeah, and just start throwing them. Yeah, exactly. That's the meat of this, and that's the stuff we want to share with our Kickstarter, right? We want to be like, yeah, this guy, he's back in Faerie in Avallen form.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Zilfi. Yeah. Maybe that's something, because we're getting close to the end of our stream.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something. Do we don't have any. Yeah, the Kickstarter is open. Do you have the link that you can share?
Yeah. Actually, there's two things I can share. One is the Kickstarter's opening, And go to Kickstarter.com, and then we search for Avallen. You'll see our previous 2 very successful projects, and then our current one. And we currently have 278 followers, so that's pretty good. So we launched this on Monday, I think.
Yeah, in there.
Yeah. So, and we're hoping to launch. I haven't got a date set exactly yet, but we are planning it to be the end of October. It's always got a library ready. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm not sure how that would work. Yeah, let me think about that. But this looks pretty great. Yeah.
Yeah, we might look at things and then we're like, huh, we don't have this book and we don't know where to get it, and we'll just ask you do you have this book? And it's can you look up this specific thing and let us know if that's the thing. Yeah, so thank you though, and we'll keep that in mind. I think
also,
that's very
relevant as well. As I'm currently commissioning artwork for a Faerie court. And we have some work in progress shots, I guess, but it's a very, very early stage. I don't know where this is going to load. It's going to be here. Sorry, that's covered up your face. Oh, I guess this is where we're at. Yeah. It's going to be a dual image. So on the left-hand side here, this is going to be a treasure room in the Ever Stranger's fort. It's going to feature piles of gold. And a portal, and then we're gonna have this is gonna be an image of the Faerie court here. Actually, I have a better version of this, but I don't know where it is. Oh shoot, I should have prepared it on chat. Okay, that'll be what I'll show you next time, chat, I guess. There's a current version of this somewhere. Where did it go? Oh wait, I know where to find it. It'll be here somewhere. But it'll take me time. I want to show it to you now, but it'll take time. Maybe that's okay. Let me go marketing. This is all stuff I should put off stream. There we go. Quick, Kurt, you occupy chat for a second.
Well, I'm excited you're excited to share it. So yeah, no, it's exciting. We're excited to put all this stuff together, and yeah, there's stuff again. We're always writing and we're always talking about stuff even off the stream. So thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and joining us for your first time chatter. I think I don't know if it was Wisty Millen first time chatter. Probably not.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's the same thing, but we just have coloured versions come in. And the key part here is that I told him, I was like, I like the idea that Ever Stranger's world being lit by Aurora Borealis, and just this teal kind of light effect.
Is that a statue of the Ever Stranger or just the Ever Strangers themselves?
I think it's a statue. Yeah, he's not in court. Okay. Yeah. And then we have the treasure room as well, that's lit by these floating candles and ghosts that pass through it, guarding stuff. So yeah, the Ever Stranger's court I wanted to be dark, deathly, but also beautiful. That was what I told the artist, and I think they're slowly nailing it.
And a big part of the Faeseeker's Guide to Avallen is, yes, this is stuff that's facing the the game master mainly, and it is kind of the other world, but we'll give ideas on how your adventuring party can interact with these spaces that we're fleshing out. Right? It's not pure this is the cosmology. Anyway, don't worry about it. It's the game. We want people to be able to work with this stuff and see their characters to be a part of it and feel the texture of these spaces as a character, right? So thank you, Sophie. It's looking wonderful. I agree with that. Can't wait to see the rest of the artwork. 100%. You guys are doing great. So yeah, keep it going.
Yeah, I guess the thing we haven't touched today as well is that we said that the tale with Tego each court will be different, but they also look different from each other as well, right? So
yeah, so that's something
I currently have concepting in mind about how they look different from each other. I have a bunch of reference artwork, but I don't know if I'm going to show that on stream right now. Maybe another time. Sure. All right, should we end it there then? We're at time, overtime even.
We're at time. It's 10:02. It's my apartment's a mess because I bought a bunch of stuff and I need to figure out where to put it, and it's wild, but it was a good time. Good trip. Good. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kurt. This is Darren. Shout out to Pigeon Paladin, Zilphia, and Wisty Melon for your comments, and Diego for your question. So, yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, much appreciated. Take it easy, guys. See you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy.